Australia is known for being an odd and mysterious continent. While it stands apart from other places in the world with its strange animals and unique environment, it still has its fair share of creepy and mysterious happenings. And tonight we'll be looking at 4 of the most chilling stories from down under. But seeing as I'm American, I've invited my friend Chris to try his hand at narration, and give these spooky stories a truly authentic Australian feel. So with that being said, let's get into 4 scary stories from Australia.
The Entity of Dread. I live in Victoria, Australia, and we don't get snow unless you venture up the mountain area where the climate is significantly colder. As expected, I very rarely see snow in person, so during my childhood, my mum and I would visit my father up in Glenorchy, Victoria at least once a year. He would drive us up a nearby mountain where we would indulge in what little snow we could play in. It was never particularly much, but I loved it. I have a distinct memory of the nausea from the bending roads and my ears getting blocked from ascending so fast. And I'll never forget the fear that our car would swerve off the narrow road and roll off the cliff. Good old times. It was during one of these trips that my mum and I were on a small hike through a thriving forest up in the mountains. Unfortunately, I don't remember the name of the location, as I was around 8 to 11 years old at the time. There wasn't much snow as usual, just patches, but it was beautiful and there was no one else in sight. I can't recall why it was just the 2 of us at that moment. My father did have a short temper at times, so possibly my mum wanted a break from him. I remember us feeling so content with our lives at that moment. Then this feeling washed over us, a feeling of impending doom and danger. It was a sinking feeling in my chest. I remember asking my mum something like, "Do you feel that too?" As we just stood there bewildered. We felt that we didn't belong here, that we should leave immediately. Now, might I add that this was during the day, not at night. I had been in the Scouts most of my childhood and was very familiar with this type of environment. Yet, here we were, frantically looking around for the source of this dread we were feeling deep in our gut. It felt like we were being watched, like 1,000 judgmental eyes on us. It was so intimidating. I remember my heart beating rapidly and my body shaking as we quickly paced back to my father's car. There was no sound of sticks breaking, no ominous figures within the trees, and no growling of a monstrous creature. Just a feeling. I asked my mom to describe her side of the story, and she remembers an image in her head of a large creature crawling up the mountain to get us. She felt as if it was in the wind. Every big gust it would come closer and closer. There was a nagging voice in her head to leave, yelling "Get out!" over and over again, and getting louder the longer we were there. It was a bit dramatic, but still an interesting interpretation of the same event. Unfortunately, nothing else happened that day. We made it back to the car safely and proceeded with our trip. Maybe for the best, who knows? Was it supernatural? A negative entity? Cursed land? I know of numerous places deemed cursed by Indigenous Australian communities and landmarks they outright refuse to set foot on. Or could it just be a one-time experience, some force just passing through and not originating in that area?
The Aussie Rake. When I was living in Australia for a year, I was once in a passenger carrier traveling through towns to get to the next destination I was heading to. We're passing through rural towns in New South Wales that are small but still well populated. We passed by a field or a park where families are having picnics, enjoying the day, kids are running around playing, etc. While I'm looking at the park and all the people in it with my head on the window, I suddenly see what looks like a gray zombie walking through the park. It's walking right by families and people sitting down, but no one seems to take notice of this thing that's sticking out like a sore thumb. No one is looking up at what I assume is a freak in a Halloween costume when it's not Halloween. It's moving slow and limping like a zombie would, but has a dead look in its eyes and its skin is gray. If my memory serves me correctly, it's wearing tattered clothes and has a Frankenstein monster kind of air about it. That's the best way I could describe it, like a gray zombie Frankenstein monster. My eyes follow it the entire time I bus passes the park, which is only for a moment. But the thing that freaks me out the most is how it's passing all these families and no one is paying any attention to it. Thing is, it didn't necessarily seem evil to me, just sad. It didn't make eye contact with me. It was just walking slowly and sadly through the park. I don't know what to make of it. A very short 10-second psychosis on my part. Something supernatural. Because I can't explain this strange humanoid. And I can't find any similar stories of this kind of encounter.
A dimension down under. So, to start off, I should say that even though this happened last night, I am still reeling. I've been discussing the events with my friends all morning, and suffice to say, they all find it fascinating and somewhat akin to a story on the No Sleep subreddit. But they're familiar with my uncanny habit of finding myself in paranormal situations, like I'm a damn magnet for the weird, so they all believe my story without a doubt. Most of them have gone through some form of paranormal experience with me already. Basically, I like to be impulsive at night, and I don't mean break into buildings impulsive, though I've been there too. This time it was just go for a long random night drive impulsive. Clear the thoughts kind of situation. My friend and I hopped into a car and drove out of town in an effort to end up in the middle of nowhere, which isn't hard living in Australia, as most of our landmass is still just forest land and desert if you leave civilization. So plenty of space to find yourself lost in. We kind of expect to get lost partway through the drive, of course. It was half the fun. What we didn't expect, after driving through a town we'll just call CN for its initials, was finding ourselves in the middle of nowhere, on a road caged on the sides by snow-white trees that often looked to be glowing in what was extremely low moonlight. Should not have been glowing at all, mind you. I noted that we left CN at like 8 at night, sending out texts to loved ones on my friend's phone for her, and though I was getting somewhat shitty signal the entire drive, it hadn't dropped out yet. We hit the white trees then, and the signal drops to fucking 0. Messages come back unable to send, Spotify dies even though the songs have been downloaded to the phone, and suddenly the road starts looping in a perpetual S-spin that we could not fucking shake. Generally, I follow a rule of driving at night that if weird shit starts to happen, that you don't just turn around in the dead middle of the road, so I tell my friend to look for a driveway or some kind of invitation to turn around rather than doing a U-turn right there. While in this looping S-bend, we see a sign in the trees. I think I saw it at least 8 times over. Who knows how many, I didn't count. The sign was old, mostly rotted, carved out to say Touchwood, and now looking for it, I can't find any sign of the damn road or the place called Touchwood at all. We eventually find a spot to turn around, not far from the sign actually, kind of like it appeared from nowhere considering we've been apparently looping for like half an hour by now. And after turning around, we managed to get out. Heading back to CN, we managed to get a signal again, thank God. Everything comes back on our phones, Signal, Spotify, everything, and we find out that a half hour spent in a loop was apparently 4 hours. It's past midnight by the time we even get back to our town out past CN, and both of us are just weirded out and excited at the same time. But like, I have spent over half of my morning looking at satellite images of the region, scouring Facebook groups of the area and such, looking for this Touchwood place, and the road we were on. It doesn't seem to exist, or maybe I'm just particularly horrible at finding things. But nothing about that trip was normal. The S-bend looping road that never stopped, and the sign repeating itself every few bends we did, and the 4 hours of lost time.
The Black Stickman. So this occurred about half a year ago. I had to walk to my bus stop on the way to school. Usually I'm driven as it's about half an hour's walk away and my bus leaves at 7. But I had to walk up this day. Anyway, I'm in the southern hemisphere, Australia specifically, placing this in the middle of winter when it's still pitch black outside. As I got to the other end of my driveway where the road starts, I saw someone walking on the other side of the road. Their body was dead black with no facial features or anything. This scared the shit out of me as it was. Even more so as I live on a backcountry road with no one else around, meaning it wasn't just someone going for a walk. Terrified and hoping it was someone just going for a walk all the way out here for whatever reason, I tried to speak to them and just say hello. When they completely ignored me, I got out my phone and shined my torch on them. As I did, they disappeared, starting where the torch was shining, then altogether. That was enough for me to nope the fuck out of there, and I started walking back to my house. But I walked backwards, facing where I saw the entity, as I was far too scared to turn around. As I did, it came back into view, but it was much larger, 3 to 4 meters tall, when before it was the size of a normal person, and I could see it growing as it got larger. It continued to follow me until I got back inside my house, where I just stayed. I ended up getting my mom to drive me to the bus stop as I was far too scared to go outside and walk down there again. In the weeks following the encounter at night, I heard 2 people conversing, but I couldn't make out any words. I know what I saw, and that it was real and not an illusion from the light or anything else.